à tout le monde à cette bienvenue à tout le monde à cette conférence de presse. Ça a lieu sur le territoire autochtone, c'est-à-dire île aux Tortues, Turtle Island. Welcome, everyone. We're living and working and playing on the territory known as Turtle Island, coast to coast to coast. Welcome to this news conference, where we will have the pleasure of introducing our candidate for federal NDP leader. After the introduction, Yves will make a statement, and then we'll go to questions, and we'll give priority to questions from the media. So the Socialist Caucus, well, I should introduce myself. My name is Barry Weisletter, and I'm co-chair of the NDP Socialist Caucus. And I'm pleased and proud to say on behalf of the Socialist Caucus that we're here to announce the nomination of Yves Engler, a distinguished Montreal-based author and activist, as our candidate for federal NDP leader. Engler brings to the contest a fearless commitment to global peace, democratic accountability, workers' rights, and socialism. Born in Vancouver in 1979 to union organizer parents who were deeply rooted in political activism, Engler learned early that social change demands hard work and struggle. Yves has authored 13 critically acclaimed books, including Stand on Guard for Whom?, which is a history of the Canadian military. That's this book. I'd like people to buy his books. And the first in the list was Canada and Haiti, waging war against the poor majority. And this is, I think, the 20th anniversary year of that book. His task has been to expand public understanding of Canada's foreign policy and its impact on working people and oppressed peoples around the world. Under Yves Engler, an NDP government would champion 1, morally grounded foreign policy based on solidarity; 2, economic democracy; 3, freedom of expression and civil rights; 4, land back and end to Canada's dispossession of Indigenous peoples; 5, environmental stewardship. He'll elaborate on all of those, I'm sure. So without any further ado, I'd like to call on our candidate for federal NDP leader, Yves Engler. Let's give him a big hand.
Merci, merci Barry, merci tout le monde. Mon nom c'est Yves Engler. Je suis prêt à prendre des questions en français. Mon discours va être en anglais parce que je pense que la majorité des gens sont des anglophones ici. Mais s'il y a des médias d'autres qui veulent que j'explique quelque chose en français, je suis content de le faire. Sean Orr for Vancouver City Councillor. Zoran Mandani for Democratic New York Mayor candidate. Why not Yves Engler for leader of the NDP? Obviously, this is a long shot bid. But I'm not just running to drive the debate away from the mushy middle. Running here to win this position. And my initial reaction to being asked by the Socialist Caucus to run was basically to sort of reject it. But then in thinking about it more, there is a moment here, and there are two issues that I believe that I have the knowledge and credibility to speak on that are centrally important issues of our time. And that first one is, of course, Canada's complicity in Israel's Holocaust in Gaza. And, you know, I wrote a book, Canada and Israel Building Apartheid, 15 years ago. I have been engaged in this issue for 20 some odd years. I was in the student union at Concordia and the vice president, and I was suspended, then expelled from university in the aftermath of the 2002 Benjamin Netanyahu protests. I have the knowledge and I would say the credibility to take on the genocide lobby. I will push to jail anyone in this country who's participated in Israeli military crimes in Gaza. I will push to have institutions in this country that are inducing young people to be investigated, to join the Israeli military, to be investigated under Canada's Foreign Enlistment Act. I will push a whole series of other um, elements of Canadian complicity that are not being challenged by the NDP at this moment. But the other issue here, I think we have to look at the many, many tens, hundreds, millions even of Canadians uh, who are appalled by the liberals and conservatives' support for this Holocaust in Gaza. They also should be terrified by the idea of giving these monsters who've been enabling these crimes we're seeing every day of children being burned in Gaza alive. The people enabling that, we are in the process of giving them much, much greater means to wage violence internationally. That should appall us. That should scare us. But you'll find that when Mark Carney is talking about $1 trillion over the next decades in boosting the Canadian military budget, that's what we're talking about, $1 trillion. We're seeing in the Globe on Saturday, the former head of the public service talk. He says this is going to be 6 or 7 budgets that's going to be trying to figure out how to deal with this huge increase in military spending. He says it's going to be the next 2 elections where this is going to be a central issue, trying to deal with this increased military spending. We have a situation where the NDP leadership is not really in a position to push back. They're not in a position to push back against military spending because they've bought in to Canadian foreign policy. They've bought into this pro-US, pro-NATO foreign policy that is the justification for these increases in military spending. This is an issue. We are going to see ever more Canadians, unions, social groups who are going to start realizing that this NATO business that we've committed to of 5%, up to 5% of GDP on the military in one form or another, this is a huge threat to social programs. This is boosting an institution whose values are not progressive values. This is an authoritarian institution. This is a sexist institution. This is a racist institution. And we just saw that in the Ottawa Citizen and new revelations about these racist and whatever posts from the Canadian military. This is well documented for many, many decades. I can obviously get into that in more detail. So this issue of pushing back against this incredible, unprecedented increase, 70 years since at least the Korean War, 70 years increased military spending. This is central to push to the candidacy. Now, of course, there are many, many other issues that need to be, that face us. Obviously, the ecological issue is just barreling down on us. I'm quite clear we need to phase out the tar sands immediately. Obviously, we have a whole history of colonialism that we need to take seriously. We're going in the wrong direction here early on in Carney. We need land back. We need to, there's a whole question of civil liberties. I'm calling right away off the hop. We need to get rid of Canada's terrorism list. And of course, there's going to be a whole host of other measures, policies that are going to be developed in the coming weeks, coming months as the campaign unravels. Big picture, we need to put on the agenda that capitalism is driving us to ecological catastrophe. The inherent desire for endless consumption that capitalism has, profit maximization, is a threat, is a war on the earth, but it's also a war on democracy. Right? We have a situation where we claim to be in a democracy, but we have, all these billionaires. We have an economy that's in the hands of a very small few. So we need to put on the agenda economic democracy. The NDP needs to be raising these issues. They're not being raised anywhere. We don't need just about, we need a, not just, one person, one vote in the political sphere. We need one person, one vote in the economic sphere. And that needs to be part of the debate within the NDP leadership race. Now, again, this is a long shot candidate. I'm not naive about that. But I also think we have to be clear that there are tens, hundreds of thousands of Canadians that are appalled by Canada's contribution to Israel's crimes. We say half of Canadians think it's a genocide. I spoke 2 months ago in Ottawa. I spoke in front of 20,000 people, anti-genocide demonstration. 6 weeks into Israel's Holocaust in Gaza, I spoke at a demo in Montreal. About 50,000 people were there. The way to success here is getting 25,000, 30,000 people to sign up to become members. Obviously, also convince a slice of the current membership to push to support bold change, to support a policy of economic democracy, a policy of land back, of genuine decolonization, a policy of international justice, a policy of instead of putting all this money into the war machine, put money into social programs, in enhancing social entitlements. That's what we need. And let's see what happens in the coming months with the race. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yves Engler. And you can see, friends and neighbors, why we are presenting him as our candidate for federal NDP leader. He's going to drive a debate that's going to bring the issues to the forefront with honesty and with great passion. So we're now open to questions. If you wish to ask a question, please indicate in some way, and our tech person will then call on you and facilitate your being unmuted. We give first priority to major media. I'm looking. Mark Ramsey has raised his hand. Kiri, can you turn on his mic? Kiri, can you hear me?
Hi, Mark Ramsey with the Toronto Star. Thank you for taking questions. I got a couple questions. I don't know how much time you've got, but you've acknowledged this is a bit of a long shot. Can you just talk about how you plan on funding this campaign, if you've put some thought into that?
I mean, individual donors, small individual donors. There's no big source of money. There's no billionaire that's going to be funding the campaign. So it's going to be small individual donors, and of course, it's going to be principally volunteers that are doing the work in the campaigning. Go ahead
Mark,
with it.
Did you have a follow-up question, Mark? I guess not. All right, then Noah Jarvis has raised. Oh, hold on. Mark's mic is not on. Kiri, can you remedy that? Please indicate, Kiri, that you're working on it.
Just we could go to someone else at the meantime. So
and your mic should be left on until the person's completely finished.
So are we going to go to another questioner or back to Mark? What is it, Kiri? What would you like?
Yeah, because he unmuted, so I have to give him permission to unmute again. So I'm not seeing him on the screen. So yeah, that's why So we ideally, if we can go to someone else and then come back to Mark.
Oh, he's on the screen now with his hand raised.
Oh,
Can
yes,
I
see it. Yes.
turn on his mic?
Thank you. I'm wondering, because you're a very, I guess, controversial figure, if that's the right word, do you think you'll pass the vetting to be allowed to run by the party? And what do you think if there is an effort to bar you from running in the race?
I don't see why, if the NDP supports democracy and if the NDP supports working with social movements, I don't see why they wouldn't they would block me from running. We don't know all the rules of the race yet. And according to reports coming out of the meeting yesterday, we're seeing that there's quite a bit of dissent going on these questions about what the rules are going to be. But it seems to me that there's no reason to block. And I understand that there's lots of people who have criticisms of my writing, my activism, whatnot. Let's debate them. I'm happy to speak in whatever form of if the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs wants to host a debate to discuss these issues, I'm happy to participate in these debates. If the Canadian Global Affairs Institute or the Conference of Defense Associations want to condemn my calling for Canada to go more in the direction of Mexico, which spends 0.7% of its GDP on its military, rather than this 5% insanity, let's have those discussions. And the NDP should facilitate that. If the NDP wants to have support from social movements, support from people who are doing this volunteer grassroots activism that they say they want to support, or they say that they are the advocate of, then they should of course have allow at least for members to decide on this. Now, do I expect the forces of the pro-genocide forces in this country to try to bar me from running? I do. And I think it's because they understand that there are tens, hundreds of thousands of Canadians who are appalled by Canada's complicity in the genocide. If you go online, there's people talking about how if I was to win the leadership race already here, 24, 48 hours into this, they're saying that there's a poll on Twitter: should the NDP be barred as a terrorist organization? I mean, this is how disconnected from reality some people are in this country, who are supporting these images every single day now. 100 people are being killed in Gaza, starving, people trying to get food mostly. And we have a prime minister who is saying, I will only recognize a Zionist Palestinian state. I mean, how disconnected from the perspective of the vast majority of the world's population is our prime minister and is our political culture, that can be stated and we just move on like nothing has happened. This is remarkable. So yes, I fully expect efforts to bar me from running. The NDP should absolutely not cower in the face of the genocide lobby's pressure.
Thank you.
Okay, before the ends on screen, Barry, there's somebody better follow the chat as well. There's a question in the chat from Ann Golan. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. She wants to know Yves' stance on domestic policies.
Well, you can see my op-ed that I just published on my and the press release that I've just published on my site today about why I'm running, where I go into some stuff. I talked about. We're going to come up with a full platform here. The race hasn't even formally been launched. We don't even know the formal rules, right? So we're going to come up with a detailed. Don't worry, I'm into the details when it gets to these things. So, but it's going to take time to get it up with all the different issues. But the things I'm announcing today in domestic things that I think are important, of course, is we're going to move towards shutting down the tar sands, right? The climate crisis is out of control, right? We're just seeing again in Lytton, BC, 4 years after being wiped off the map, basically, again threatened in last days from forest fire all around the world. There's a story, 90 million people in southern Africa from drought. So this is we have to. I know this is not popular. I know there's a backlash, but we need political voices willing to say that. The measures to get there are many different elements to that. Again, the question of the terrorism list, this should disappear. The terrorism list is a threat to us. The question of land back and massively expanding indigenous jurisdiction. All these things. I worked for the Communications Energy Paper Workers Union a decade ago, just as it became Unifor, and then while it was Unifor 2.5 years, I was on the telecommunications file and other files in terms of the research department. So I've put forward policies on some of those issues. But the basic here at a big picture level is there should not even be the notion of billionaires. The notion is a absolute odious attack against democracy. Obvious attack against equality, but it's attack against democracy. You can't live in a system where there's people who have such control over the economy and the impact that has on the whole ideological sphere, and call yourself a democracy. So what we need to be doing is put forward proposals that lessen the power of the wealthy, or if you want to call it the capitalist class, and increase the power of working people. And there's many ways in which that plays out. My uncle, late uncle, has a book called Economic Democracy, the working class alternative to capitalism. He lays out the ways in which to do that, some of the ways in which to do that, reformist ways in which we expand democracy in the economic sphere. We support it. Obviously, we need to expand it in the political sphere, but even more so in the economic sphere. So that's at the big picture level. But we will be laying out, detailed policies on all of the different, domestic issues in the coming weeks and coming months.
Okay, we have many people indicating an interest in posing a question. Noah Jarvis is at the top of the list, followed by Matthew Slowly, Didier Pilon, Leah M, and others. So, Kiri, can you turn on the mic for Noah so he can pose his question?
Oh, hi. I just have a couple questions, so I'm hoping a follow-up will be afforded. But for my first question, you mentioned that you referred to Israel's operation in Gaza as not only a genocide, but as a Holocaust. I mean, the term Holocaust is used to refer to the Holocaust from 1939 to 1945. And so, how do you think Jewish Canadians or just Jewish people in general would view the use of the term Holocaust to describe Israel's operation in Gaza? And do you believe that people who are pro-Israel generally are just pro-Israel because of certain values they have, or do you believe that they are pro-genocide?
Well, the term Holocaust predates, of course, the Nazis' effort to wipe out European Jewry. I talk about in my book on the military during the Boer War, late 1890s, early 1900s, there's reference to a Holocaust back then, so that it predates. I agree with you; it's become associated with the Nazi crimes, but the term is much broader, and I think that the term genocide is genocide is a legal definition, and I think what Israel's doing meets those criteria, and that's been clear for quite a while, right? Pretty early on. The term Holocaust, I think, encapsulates a broader sense of how horrible, like beyond just the genocidal character of what Israel's doing. It encapsulates how horrible, and I don't care if people are offended by that term. We are talking about 400, the Harvard report, 400,000 people killed. And you're going to talk to me about people's feelings about using a word? I mean, it's just like the disconnect is just stunning. Now, with regards to and there are obviously many, Jewish people who use the word Holocaust to, take the, Aaron Mate or Max Blumenthal, or, I mean, prominent Jewish, critics of Israel on X. You'll see them use it all the time. So it's not, now, the Canadians, I don't think you can say you support Israel and not say that you support genocide and apartheid. I mean, it's clear cut. Israel's been an apartheid state for, I mean, its whole existence. Its basis was driving the indigenous people out and giving special rights to Jews. That's what Zionism is. And so it's been apartheid from its get-go, and it's clearly committing genocide in Gaza. So do people have emotional attachments to something they refer to as Israel? And of course, people do. But for those who believe in justice and believe all people are equal, we should be doing everything we can to stop Canada's complicity in a genocide committed by an apartheid state. And those who have feelings that go against that, that's okay. They can have feelings that if that makes them uncomfortable, that's fine.
Okay, the next question is going to be from Matthew Slowly, and then we'll hear from others. I'm going to ask each person to pose only one question because we now have a dozen questions in the lineup. So, and we're 30 minutes into the news conference. It's going very well, but we want to respect everyone's time. So Matthew, I hope that Kiri will turn on your mic and we get to hear from you and your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Yves, listen, I think you're the best guy for the job. I can't think of a better candidate. But obviously the NDP has a very long history of doing all manner of dirty and undemocratic tricks to undermine and smear and expel candidates who are genuinely left-wing and anti-imperialist, socialist and anti-imperialist, and you definitely are that. So, and I think, Socialist Caucus have done a really good job. They're positioned in a way that they can intervene into the NDP, but for the rest of the unaligned socialist left in Canada, where is the leverage going to come from? If they kick you out, like we're not, I might join the NDP again to vote for you, and I will work for you. But I'm not going to I will withdraw my support from the NDP, and I think that's a valid position to withdraw support from the NDP in the event that they repress your candidacy as they have done in the past. And I just want to know if there is a position that, or you can say that there's a social contract for the socialist left in the event that the NDP proved to be an anti-socialist or anti-left organization in their conduct towards you, and what comes next after people have mobilized on your behalf. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally share. I don't think people should engage with this in a naive way, right? We know that the NDP has, the BC NDP expelled Angelia, it was a couple years ago, from running because she looked like she's going to win. We know there's been all kinds of, individuals who've been blocked from running for different ridings nominated by the riding associations, blocked from running because they criticized Israel. We've seen that diminish. And more recently, we've seen a little bit of it in the recent election, but much less than over the past decade. We've seen the NDP block pretty simple resolutions, repeatedly block simple resolutions to convention that were endorsed by like incredible numbers of riding associations because they criticized Israel and other issues, but the Israel one's been the clearest over the past 20 years. So I don't want people to join, to support my candidacy in a way that's like drop everything else and put energy into this. There's lots of really important activism taking place on many different issues that I think electoralist stuff gets can be dangerous to put the energy in those ways. So what I can say for myself is I'm not going to curtail my opinions or my willingness to criticize the NDP or specific individuals within the NDP in doing this, leadership race. That is, I'm not going to care. I'm going to be honest with people and be, clear in my criticisms. And so I don't think that Now the question of energy and illusions, if the NDP was to block me from being able to run, I don't know exactly how they would do that, but if they just came up with some rule, said they're trying to curtail the race, of course, with the financial how much you have to put up to be able to run. So they're going to, it's between $50,000 and $100,000 is what they're talking about, which is quite a large amount of money to raise. So that's the obvious mechanism of kind of keeping the leadership race within a narrow sector of political life, of the sort of inside world, and not the social movement world. But beyond that, are they going to come out and just step out and say, Yves Engler's not allowed to run? I don't think they'll do that. They might. If they do that, of course, that tells us a lot about their willingness to engage in membership democracy and engage in substantive debate about the issues. So definitely, no one should join this. No one should support my candidacy by saying, well, the NDP is just all about democracy and all about peace and justice, and no one should have those illusions. But I think that there is clear opportunity. I'll repeat this. I think there's a clear, not an opportunity, a need, a both tactical and moral need to push aggressively on these two issues, on the question of Canada's enabling of Israel's Holocaust in Gaza, and on the question, and in some ways, this is even, as much as I've been spending my energy over the past 2 years or so on the horrors in Gaza, in some ways, even more important question is this unprecedented threat to social programs and social entitlements that is represented by massively increasing military spending. And again, we're talking about the best case scenario here with this military spending increases. The best case scenario is we just have big cuts on social programs and that we bolster an authoritarian, racist, sexist institution. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is they also commit all kinds of more acts of aggression and acts of belligerence around the world. We bolster an institution that then goes and supports Donald Trump's and the U.S. Empire's violence abroad. That's the sort of more likely scenario. So, these need to be pushed on. And again, I don't like to. I'm honest about what I know and what I don't know. I do know the Canadian military. I do know these issues. These are issues that I I spent a lot of time researching, writing, thinking about, and I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to talk about NATO McPherson. Heather McPherson, who's going to join it. She's on the NATO Association, NATO Parliamentary Association. She's on record pushing NATO, NATO, NATO. This is who the NDP leadership wants to have lead the party at a time when we're transferring huge amounts of public resources to the war machine against old age, what's going to be against pensions, what's going to be against probably even Medicare. But so this is disaster. So I'm going to be absolutely crystal clear on these issues with McPherson and any other leadership candidates about particularly around the military spending, but also the Palestine question and other issues. So yeah, that's what I can say to people. Should, I think, support the candidacy. We're going to do everything we can to impact the debate. We understand to impact the debate, we need dozens and dozens of people who are, working on it on the campaign, and we also do need to register at least a few thousand people to make it clear to the other candidates that this is serious. So we need to do that just to impact the debate in a substantive way. Obviously, to actually win the leadership, we're not talking about registering 20, 30, 40,000 people and convincing current members. Yeah.
Okay, before we go to the next questioner, which will be a woman, Leah, has identified that she wishes to ask a question. I just want to inject for a few seconds a brief report on the NDP Federal Council meeting that took place yesterday. This was the second meeting of the council to discuss the rules for the leadership contest. No decisions were made, but it wasn't for lack of trying on the part of the table officers, the top brass of the NDP. They came into the Federal Council meeting, which was attended by about 80 delegates across the country. They came into that meeting with a package dealing with the length of the campaign, the registration fee, the nature of the vote, etc. And that package was defeated. The Federal Council, which is not known as a repository of radical protest, rejected the package and said that they want to discuss line by line, debate and vote on every aspect of the rules and not take the package proffered by the party leadership. And the vote was 55% in favor of democratic debate line by line, 45% in favor of the leadership. This is unprecedented. It's a revolt at the top level of the NDP, which shouldn't be a surprise given that the party, through its mismanagement of recent campaigns, including the latest one, lost 17 MPs and 150 staff positions to boot. I just want to add one more thing, and that is the NDP Socialist Caucus is proud of its record of advocacy. Many NDP policies have been changed and have even found their way into the election campaign. At the previous NDP Federal Convention, we fought for and won commitment to fight for a $20 an hour minimum wage. I think it should be higher now, but that was an accomplishment. Along with Canada out of Afghanistan, we set that policy with majority support at an NDP convention in Quebec City not so long ago, and for electric cars and for no public funding of religious and private schools. There are many issues in which the Socialist Caucus has had an impact, and it's hard to find another political platform as large as the one offered by the NDP, which is why in this campaign by Yves and the Socialist Caucus, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are going to hear about socialist policies, what they mean in terms of domestic and foreign policy, and they're going to know that they're not alone. And whatever happens in this race, we can work together to fight for a socialist alternative, for a workers' government in this country. So now I'm going to go to Leah. Kiri, would you turn on her mic?
Thank you. Um, I am a failed NDP candidate from the last election, so I am in large and good company. My question is a very domestic question. What is your position on proportional representation, and what would be your strategy for working toward it?
Well, obviously support it. In terms of strategy working towards it, there's organizations working on the issue and support them. But you know I don't have a detailed plan on how to force liberal governments that have promised, as we know, to act to enhance the democratic element in the political sphere. Um, so, but yeah, obviously support and we need to campaign on it, but I don't have any magic solution on terms of how to force Mark Carney to do that.
Thank you, Yves. I'm going to go to another questioner now, but I simply want to indicate that for people who are engaging in debates on the chat line and rather abusive arguments employed, we're not going to call on them to ask questions. Please confine your activity to posing a single question to our candidate, Yves Engler, and let's try to have robust but respectful discussion. So I'm going to go to Gabe out on the West Coast. Gabe H.
Oh, thank you, Barry, and to the Socialist Caucus for organizing this, and thank you to Yves, who has stepped up in the situation. Just as a sort of preamble, I appreciate your acknowledgement of the long shot. I mean, they are obviously grounded in material reality. We've discussed the various aspects, vetting, the king's ransom, obviously, for the entry fee and so forth. And I have posed a question in the chat. It's more to the Socialist Caucus about how this leadership run fits with a larger strategy of building a new political left in Canada. But I'll leave that to the organizers to engage that. Yves, I want to say that I agree with you on the central question confronting us right now, is the question of the war budget, maniacal push for 5%, and all the implications that you've very clearly outlined. To me, the other sort of related question to that is the question of American annexation, which has not yet come up. And in general, I notice that there's a general unwillingness to confront that question, but the public, Canadian leadership, and even on the left. So I just would like to know what your leadership run will have to say, and what you advocate how the different peoples in this country should confront the threat of American annexation. Thank you.
Well, I mean, the element on the annexation question that I've spent most amount of time thinking about. Obviously, U.S. has far too much power in Canada. Before Donald Trump made any, threats, that we already knew that. And that's, with regards to the Canadian military, an area where I've, focused very, very in depth. You see that the Canadian military basically acts, and I've said this many, many times, they act as any dollar you put in the Canadian military is a dollar to the U.S. And that's why we see Trump, demanding Canada spend more on the military. It's a dollar to the U.S. in two senses. One, it enhances the U.S. war machine, the U.S. empire globally, and much of the money goes to U.S. Arms firms. So before any comment, and I've also joked about the fact that if the U.S. invaded Canada, and I believe there's only one country in the world that possibly could invade Canada, and that is the U.S. I've stated that if if that was to happen, the Canadian military would assist, because the Canadian military assists the US military in all of their international operations. So we have to confront that. There are people on the left who've kind of made the argument for more military spending on the grounds of the threats of Trump. But it's Trump that's pushing for us to increase the military spending. It's the Canadian military that is even the one positive thing Mark Carney has done on sort of lessening military ties to the U.S., specifically the F-35, review. The head of the Kerrigan, the head of the Chief of Defense Staff, comes out in the Toronto Star 10 days ago and is like openly pushing back. We know behind the scenes they're pushing back, but openly pushing back. So, how do we respond to Trump's threats of annexation? I think the principal way is we need to make it crystal clear to people in the U.S. that we oppose this, that we, and push back in. I see basically Mark Carney just conceding one after another to Donald Trump. This is the elbows up concession one after another to Donald Trump, and it's pretty remarkable to see how the rhetoric from Carney during the election was, I would say decent rhetoric, and then the concessions are just one after another. And I think it's in large part because so much of the ruling class and the capitalist class in this country is so tied in to the U.S. They see the world, they profit from the world in a very similar way to the U.S. Capitalist class, and so they're just pushing for concessions one after another. I think there's a lot of discomfort among the public on this, and I think that the NDP leadership has done okay in pushing back on some of this stuff. At least I think they should be going much further in raising questions of how much our intelligence agencies, how much our military is already deferential to the U.S. and really does what more or less what the U.S. wants, and essentially becomes a lobby for the U.S. within in Canada. And of course, more broadly, the corporate world is clearly willing to sell out, for their narrow economic interests. So I'm also, though I have to say, uncomfortable about Canadian nationalism or certain type of Canadian nationalism that denies the dispossession of First Nations, that denies the whole history of violence, and not just history, but it's ongoing in terms of the colonial process and vis-a-vis First Nations principally, but all kinds of other very fundamental injustices. So how do you kind of channel the progressive elements of, let's call it, left nationalism, but don't go we're not in the same boat with the Westons. Me and the Westons are not in the same boat. They're and the vast majority of Canadians, a janitor is not just like elbows up with the billionaires vis-a-vis the U.S. So I think there is some tension in there in terms of how to exactly to frame things and to push back against Trump's annexation.
Thank you, Yves. I now have questions coming from John Orrit, Gary Porter, Philip Allister, and I believe it's Alex Tyrrell, who's the leader of the Green Party in Quebec. I think we may close the list of questions following this one, upcoming, and then give Yves a chance to make some concluding remarks. But yeah, we're still going to have at least these 4 questions and answers directly. So, John Orrit, your question, please. One question. Thierry, if you could. There you go.
Hello.
Hello.
Yves. bonne chance avec cette grand défi. I have a question. It's about domestic an economic question, because we're going to have to deal with that as well. And Jagmeet Singh lost this election in so many seats because he wasn't seen as a good manager of the economy. He had no ideas to support all the social programs that we want. We need to have the revenue to do so. I believe the NDP should be running on, and should have been running on, a large wealth tax on the very wealthy in this country. I'm talking about 5% for people over $10 million or $100 million. Even a progressive tax going up 1% with as the wealth you have increases. Do you support the NDP adopting as a major part of its economic policy a wealth tax on the rich? Thanks, Yves.
I do. I mean, we need it for the revenue, and we need it also because it's a threat to democracy to have so much wealth concentrated.
There, a short question and a succinct answer. Well done, both of you. Gary, out in Victoria, British Columbia. Gary, he's going to turn on your mic. There you go.
Just had to pull off the road for a moment. Have a good day. Oops, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay. I have great hope for this campaign. I was involved in the very first phone call that was organizing the Angela Paterai campaign. There were about 80 people. And we asked, there was a $40,000 fee to get into the election race. And we asked people at the meeting how much they would contribute. And there was such optimism about this candidate, particularly on the environment and indigenous issues and so on, that we raised $40,000 at the meeting. So, there is, I think we should raise our sights here. And we have to look at Bernie Sanders, who I didn't support because he was running for the War Party Democrats, but his whole campaign was run on very small donations, masses and masses of very small donations, and just huge amounts of voluntary help. So let's raise our views on that. Now, my question really has to do with democracy and the New Democratic Party. There's a lot of people outside the party, including many of Paterai supporters, because she recruited 13,000 people in BC, and David Eby only recruited 6,500, and that's why they had to throw her out, because she was going to win. There was no doubt about it. So they threw her out because she was getting support from outside organizations. The movements began to support her and move in that direction. So they had this rule that you couldn't get support from outside organizations, which was just idiotic, and just a made-up rule to throw her out. But I think that we're going to want to look at this very large layer of people who are demoralized by the performance of the NDP, who would look at the NDP if the NDP had real solutions to real problems. And so, to me, a central feature of your campaign, Yves, and I hope you'll consider this, is to unite those people in the fight for democracy inside the party. That is the first step to democracy in society, is that the party itself has to become democratic and offers the opportunity to unite thousands and thousands and thousands of people and bring them into the party in this fight to transform the party from an undemocratic supporter of war and even in BC, the BC NDP supported the pipeline that went through Wet'suwet'en territory by giving them $6 billion of taxpayer money. So, what do you think is the possibility that we can make this a feature in your campaign, is uniting the demoralized and disoriented people in their tens, even possibly hundreds of thousands, to mobilize in the NDP and fight for democracy in the party and democracy in the country?
Well, I
Thank you,
think,
Gary. Go ahead, Yves.
I mean, it's obviously central, and I'm open to all the different suggestions in how to realize that in a concrete way in terms of within the NDP structure. My understanding is that there's basically the whole effort to have a quick leadership race was to avoid the leadership race turning into a platform of more and more people getting engaged and becoming part of sort of rekindling or building riding level democratic kind of debate and structures. So, but I think that obviously is big picture level, not just within the NDP, but big picture level that is central to political change. And I think concretely there has been, the number of protests that there have been against Canada's complicity in the genocide in Gaza. It's amazing. It's absolutely like we're thousands and thousands. Like I said, one of those here in Montreal got up to 50,000. Uh, NDP MPs haven't attended basically any of them. I was thinking about this, I'm joking. I've probably been to like 50 times more Palestine demonstrations over the past 21 months than all of the possible other leadership candidates combined. And so like if you're not engaged where people are, like mobilizing and there's this outpouring of social movement activism. It's particularly young, it's particularly racialized too. This is there's lots of groups on the left that talk about, oh, we want to be more less white and more engaged, more racialized. And there's like huge campaigning, huge mobilizations of particularly young racialized communities that there's basically no presence at, attending and supporting and advocating for. And yeah, I think that now there are obviously, I do want to be, I want to be clear in the criticism of the NDP. Where the NDP deserves criticism, it deserves to be criticized. But I think this is something much more broad in our political culture than just the NDP. The structures of our society, try to drive people away from political engagement. And so we do need to challenge that kind of like at a bigger picture level. But undoubtedly, I'd like to, as part of this campaign, I'd like to do, I've done this with some of my books. I've done like, 40 different speaking, across the country, 40 different communities speak. It's harder to do that now because the Greyhound doesn't cross the country. But just tons and tons of events, event on foreign policy, event on economic democracy and what's the alternative to capitalism. That needs to be part of engaging people and putting forward ideas. That's to me kind of like central part of the democratic process, is having these debates. People come at it from all kinds of different angles. You'll find when you do these meetings, you'll have people all kinds of different conspiracy kind of ideas out there but people need to work through this and think through this and hear different perspectives and discuss these things collectively. So for sure.
Thank you, Yves, for your response to Gary's question. Before I call on Philip, I just want to make a very quick point, and that is, despite the horrible exclusion of Apatarai in BC in the race for, NDP leadership and the premier's position there, Socialist Caucus continued the struggle. Unfortunately, 10,000 people left the NDP without completing that struggle following her undemocratic, unjust exclusion. But the Socialist Caucus recognizes the NDP is the only mass union-based political party in North America. And until there's a very sizable alternative to the left of it, I mean, consisting of hundreds of thousands of supporters, imagining an alternative that lacks a base is just self-defeating. Okay, Philip, go ahead.
Barry, there's a question in the chat that I think should be answered from Gabe H. Will the SC organize a speaking tour around Yves' campaign?
The answer is yes.
Okay, so there's the answer coming. Go
But
ahead.
we,
Sorry.
but we need your help, and we're going to need a lot of money. And the last thing I want is to send Yves into meetings alone. You know, he should have traveling companions, and you know, he's got a family that he's raising. We have to take that into consideration, and his availability, and you know how much it costs to. Well, there's no Greyhound bus, so we'll have to fly. But we'll see what we can do. We'll do what we can. Philip, Alistair, please go ahead.
Thank you, Yves, for stepping up and running. You're challenging centers of power. Are you prepared for the backlash, and how are you going to respond to the inevitable backlash from centers of power?
I mean, I'm going to respond with honesty and and integrity. I mean, I'm not doing this to change my perspective. I'm not looking to sugarcoat what I see as going on in the world. I think we face some major threats that we need to challenge, and I don't. I've not cowed to the pro-Israel forces in the past. I've been clear on the military. I've going back into my time in the student union. During the student strike in 2012 in Quebec, I mean, I go to demonstrations. I've been a lot of demonstrations where the police, brutally repress people. I think that, like, when you look at just the horrors of what's going on in Gaza, I mean, to be jailed or to be have your life made a little bit uncomfortable or some pain. To me, this is like, we need to do this to challenge this stuff. So I don't know how to respond to that, but except for saying that I understand that if there's any traction in the campaign, obviously we're already seeing it online. There's already people, panics in the extremist elements of the genocide lobby, and I expect that to pick up, to grow. I'm not backing down. I'm not changing my tune. So.
Well said, Yves. Okay, just before I go to Alex, if there's any female or gender fluid people who would like to ask a question, because we've had so few of those, I will call on you. But first, I'm going to go to Alex Tyrell. Bienvenue, Alex.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Yves. Congratulations on your candidacy. I'm writing an article for the Global Green News about this, and I was wondering, since you spoke about a lot of environmental priorities like shutting down the tar sands and also this anti-militaristic stance, which I think would resonate with a lot of Green Party voters and members and candidates, do you have a plan to win over the support of people who usually support the Green Party?
Well, I think the plan would be, we put issues before partisan questions. And so if there are people who either have been or members of the Green Party, and I know there's lots of people around the Green Party that are very unhappy with the current leadership, and certainly their position on militarism and even the genocide in Gaza. I certainly invite them to look at what I stand for, and so I certainly will be reaching out to people. I've been very clear in my criticisms of not only of the different NDP sellout stuff, but Elizabeth May and Green Party moves, and yeah, I mean, it's not been a the environment and the ecological crises has not been central to my activism over the past years. I did co-author a book called Cars and Capitalism, Stop Signs, Cars and Capitalism, on the road to economic, social, and ecological decay, where I did devote a significant amount of time to researching and thinking about these issues, and so I'm deeply committed to ecological issues, and I see, as I said, I see the capitalism's inherent desire for endless consumption to is antithetical to sustainability. So I think we need to be putting forward that. I've actually, I've seen a lot. I just saw the Pembina Institute had an op-ed in the Globe, report on business a week ago, and the guy was like, "There's something to the effect of there's no problem with extracting oil. There's only a problem with this level of tar sands." And how could a supposed environmental organization state that something that's so clearly contrary to the science and the need to immediately and radically transition off of fossil fuels? And to me, so there's lots of what I would call conceding to the dominant narrative, and quite frankly, conceding to the wealthy and the capitalists within the environmental movement, and so we need to challenge that. There's a placard just around the corner I just saw by my house. It's la terre, l'air et la rivière ont besoin des révolutionnaires. So, air, rivers, and the land needs revolutionaries. And that's what I see in terms of in the environmental movement needs to be much more systemic in its challenge. And obviously, there's lots of people within the Green Party who understand that, want that direction, and are unhappy with the leadership's willingness to be bold on these issues.
Thank you, Yves. For the last question, I'm going to go to JC with pronouns they, them, speaking to us from Windsor. JC?
Okay, so I know we haven't gone into it at all in this one, but I'm actually worrying about LGBTQ rights and the continuous attacks, specifically because I am so close to the US, being on the border, that I'm seeing it creep up into Canada. I'm actually wondering, and this would probably be something in your domestic policy you haven't thought about or worked on yet, but how would you continue to safeguard our rights as LGBTQ members of Canada and the world?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is to be really clear that, opposition to, right-wing forces that are, pushing regressive ideologies and measures, which we're seeing a whole bunch of with the Trump administration. But in terms of a detailed platform on the issues, I'm not. I don't have that now. The hope here is to be reaching out to different organizations and scholars or activists to help shape the platform, and I would be happy for your contribution on that front. But yeah, I mean, we need to denounce the different measures in the U.S. military, the anti-trans measures in the U.S. military we're seeing, all that kind of stuff, and just open homophobia that's coming out of people in the MAGA world. But we've seen that with there's a whole, I mean, the business pages talk a lot about how the prides across the country are having more and more difficulty in getting corporate sponsorships, and that's because of what's coming from the US on the attacks there's interesting questions that go into that in terms of when I was at the Unifor in 2014 and the Trans March. I got a shirt from the Trans March, and it was sponsored by TD Bank, and in one sense that's obviously a good thing, and we want corporations, so long as they exist in their current form, to be sponsoring these types of events. Another side, I was made a little bit uncomfortable about wearing a t-shirt that had a logo for TD Bank, but yeah, so I'm certainly open to proposals and ideas, but obviously the first step is to condemn the MAGA world and the Trump administration's hostility to LGBTQ rights.
Yves, one reason why we have so many people on this news conference, like over 60 at the peak, is because of the tremendous work you've done in researching and writing about the domestic and international issues that really confound the country and the population. If people want to buy this book or others like it, how do they go about it? Can they order it from you, or is it in a select number of bookstores? What's your advice to those who'd like to read your stuff? You're muted, Yves.
Sorry. So I think most libraries across the country have at least some of my books. So that's the easiest way if you have a local public library, and obviously the academic libraries as well. But from the publishers, usually Black Rose, Baraka Books, and Turning the Tide. My sister's partner runs Turning the Tide in Saskatoon, is a left-wing bookstore, and it's been going now for 20 years or more now, and which is obviously very difficult for left-wing bookstores. But they do the online sales, or the main online sales, turningthetide.ca, I believe.
The Spartacus Books in Vancouver have your stuff?
They have. I've done events there. They have in the past. I don't know for sure right now, but yeah.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap this. I found it to be quite an inspiring experience, an honest and dynamic dialogue with our candidate. I think you all can see why we've asked Yves to be our candidate, and what a marvelous job he's going to do. He's going to put issues that really matter on the table. They're going to be visible on the political landscape more than ever, or more than in a long time. So our hats off to Yves, doing a tremendous job. Thank you all for participating today. And I'm just going to plug one last thing. If you want to get in on this campaign on the ground level, if you want to roll up your sleeves, I'm wearing short sleeves, but if you want to roll up the theoretical sleeves and get into the campaign, donate money, write articles, do op-eds, commission some social media, then you should come to the next meeting of the NDP Socialist Caucus. And when is that? Okay, grab a pen and paper, because I'm going to tell you. The next meeting of the Socialist Caucus online is on Sunday, July 13th. That's Sunday, July the 13th. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which means 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 8:30 p.m. Newfoundland Labrador time. Big country. And we need a big campaign to take advantage of this opening that the NDP's decline affords socialists who want to educate and organize the working class to fight for transformative change. So Sunday, July 13th, 7 p.m., to plan the campaign. We're looking for volunteers to do everything you can imagine. So make sure you're there. And thank you all for participating today. And Yves, most of all, thank you to you for the tremendous work you're doing and for saying yes when the question was put to you a second time. We need you as our candidate. We've got a great candidate. And I look forward to the campaign in a way that I haven't looked forward to a campaign in a long, long time. So let's make it happen.
Thanks, everyone.